However, the most substantial Quranic references to Christian themes are found in the Quran's narratives of the Annunciation and the Nativity. And here we have very extensive passages in the Quran. So, for instance, in Surah 3, verses 31 to 7, we read about the birth of Mary, who is dedicated to God, perhaps as some later Muslim commentators have speculated, as one of the temple virgins in Jerusalem. The text goes on, "Her Lord accepted her graciously and made her grow in grace. Zachariah took charge of her. Whenever Zachariah entered the sanctuary to her, he found beside her a provision. He said, 'O Mary, how did you come by this?' She replied, 'It is from God. God provides without reckoning for whomsoever he will.'" Like several of the Quranic references to the Virgin Mary, this includes non-biblical material. In fact, there's more about the Virgin Mary in the Quran than there is in the New Testament. Perhaps one should point out here the function of Mary in Muslim piety, particularly interesting, obviously, to those who have a Catholic commitment. The Virgin Mary is revered in the Quran. She works miracles. Some perfectly respectable medieval Muslim theologians have numbered her amongst the prophets because God speaks to her, and that's the definition of what a prophet is, if God speaks to you directly. However, Mary, although her virginity is affirmed, is not regarded as Theotokos, the mother of God, because of course Jesus, in the Muslim view, is not God incarnate, but merely another divinely inspired prophet. So although the Blessed Virgin is very revered by Muslims and is seen as some kind of model, nonetheless she doesn't have such an exalted place in the divine economy of salvation that you'll find her playing in Catholicism. And particularly in recent Catholicism, it was only in 1950 that the doctrine of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin was declared to be divinely inspired doctrine by the Vatican. So again, we have another figure who seems to be a point of contact and possible fruitful interaction between Muslims and Christians. But when we look a little bit further, we see that there are in fact key differences. Mary as a... Sorry, did you have a question?
I think it's interesting that she's still considered a virgin, that have that in the Quran. Is there, has there been philosophical discussion about that? why... Mm-hmm. Of all the prophets that are born, why is Jesus born?
It's just regarded as one of Mary's miracles with no further significance. In the New Testament, obviously, it's regarded as the expression of the immaculate coming into the world of the Logos, who has to come into the world in a way that's unpolluted by fleshly sin or whatever. Islam can't see things in those terms because sexuality has, as in Judaism, been regarded rather more positively in the Muslim tradition than in Christianity. So the accounts of the conception of the Prophet Muhammad, for instance, are quite explicitly sexual. There's no implication of an immaculate conception there. But it's been carried over from Christianity into the Muslim conception, but diminished, if you like, and reduced merely to the level of one of her miracles, rather than anything with great cosmological importance. Another point that's perhaps interesting to bear in mind is Mary as role model. She is another of these four women whom the Prophet mentioned as perfected women, women without sin. However, she has in practice not functioned as a model for Muslim women in the way that she has for Christian women, both Orthodox and Catholic, less so obviously for the Protestant churches. And the reason for this is precisely that her virginity is not, in the Muslim view of things, esteemed or esteemable in the Muslim context in the way that it can be in Christianity. And the role model for Muslim women traditionally has been Fatima, the Prophet's daughter, not the Virgin Mary. And there's an interesting commentary on this by some feminist writers, incidentally. There's an American Catholic, one of the Maryknoll community of liberal Catholics, who's written a book on women's spirituality. And she points out that one of the problems that some modern women can have with Mary as a model is that it seems that her perfection is conditional upon her transcending of her body and her normal physical functions. And this carried over very much into early Christian ideas of female sanctity, that the ideal woman was a nun, was a virgin, that she rejected motherhood and the normal functions of her gender. In Islam, interestingly, we find, although she is venerated as a kind of unique figure, she's not seen as a model so much as is Fatima. And Fatima's greatness is precisely the fact that she engendered the Prophet's descendants, the Ahl al-Bayt. She is the fertile progenitrix of this effectively spiritual elite amongst the Muslims. And as a model for Muslim women, she affirms rather than questions the spiritual value of motherhood. And Maura O'Neill's book is, I think, quite interesting in drawing this comparison. A little bit more about the Blessed Virgin. In Surah 19, verses 16 to 34, we get the story of the Annunciation. One of the most beautiful passages in the Qur'an, particularly in Arabic. It has a lovely rhythm, it rhymes, it really is quite exquisite. I have some of it here. I don't know if there's another volunteer for reading this one. Oops, thank you very much.
Mentioned in the book Mary, when she withdrew from her people to an easterly place, she took in front of them a veil. Then we sent her to our Spirit, who appeared to her as a man without fault. She said, I seek refuge in the merciful God from you, if you fear God. He said, I am but the messenger of God to bestow upon you a pure son. She said, how may I have a son when no man has touched me and I was not unchaste? He said, thus shall it be, your Lord has said, it is easy for me, that we may make him a sign unto the people and a mercy from us. It is a thing decreed.
Okay, so that's quite familiar to Christian readers. It's very similar to the biblical account, although there are a few differences. But then we get the story of the Nativity, which is very different and more or less completely unfamiliar. You want to read the last bit?
And the pains of childbirth drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. She cried, would that I had died before this and had been a thing forgotten. Then he called her from beneath her. Grieve not, the Lord has set before you a stream. Shake towards you the trunk of the palm, and it will drop moist, ripe dates upon you.
Thanks.